Hello friends, welcome back. Today we're going to continue with Advanced Node and Express. We're going to implementation of social authentication. The basic path this kind of authentication will follow in your app is user clicks a button or link sending them to our route to authenticate using a specific strategy. For here I think we're using GitHub. Your route calls passport.authenticate and then passes in a string of the word GitHub, which redirects them to GitHub. The page the user lands on GitHub allows them to log in if they aren't already. If it then takes them to approve access to their profile from our app. The user is then returned to our app at a specific callback URL with their profile if they are approved. They are now authenticated and your app should check if it is a returning profile or save it to your database if it is not. Cool. So I think we've all done that on the internet. We've used things like GitHub or Facebook or Twitter to log into a plate. That's what we're doing here. So our strategies with OAuth require that you have at least a client ID and a client secret, which is a way for the service to verify who the authentication request is coming from and if it is valid. These are obtained from the site you are trying to implement authentication with, such as GitHub, and are unique to your app. They are not to be shared. These should never be uploaded to a repository or written directly into your code. A common practice is to put them in your .env file and reference them like process.env.github client ID. For the challenge, we're going to use GitHub's strategy. Okay, so we know we're going to be using .env files, which means we're going to have to update these on Heroku for our example. So obtaining your client ID and secret from GitHub is done if your account profile setting under developer settings, then OAuth applications. Click OK, register a new application with your app, paste it into the REPL.it homepage. Note the project's code's URL. And lastly, for the callback URL, paste the same URL as the homepage, but with auth GitHub callback added on. This is where users will redirect us for us to handle after authentication on GitHub. Save your returned information as GitHub client ID and GitHub client secret in your .env file. In your routes file, add a social auth to true. So here we've got route login and then post authentication. It looks like that, but then we're okay, so that's something different. Now create two routes accepting GET request for auth GitHub and auth GitHub callback. The first should only call GitHub. The second should call passport to authenticate GitHub with a failure redirect to the root directory. And then if that is successful, redirect to the /profile, similar to the last example. As an example of how auth GitHub callback should look is similar to how we handle a normal login. So here's how we handle a normal login. But here I think we're going to make a post request and then we're going to say, I'm not sure. We'll just work through it as we go. So submit your page when you think you've got it right. Okay, so let's pull this back a little bit and we'll think about this. So this is probably going to be in our authentication file, right? So let's pull the authentication file up here. And I guess we'll start from the top. So these are found by doing this. It should never be a common practice. Obtaining your client ID with GitHub is done on your account profile. So I'm going to go to under developer settings. So, well, I guess we can just go to GitHub. And I'm guessing account profile will be here, settings, and then register a new application. No, what do we need to look for here? Under settings, under developer settings. So developer settings, register a new application. OAuth apps, register a new application. Advanced Node and Express tutorial. And then I'm going to add in, this is our homepage URL. Basically just a tutorial. Authorization callback URL. Okay, so And lastly, for the callback URL, paste in the same URL as the home page, but with this. So we're going to go our auth callback, but then we're also going to make sure we put in the root URL. So whatever your GitHub is, it won't be the same as mine, almost certainly. Cool. So now I think we could register the application. This is where users will be redirected to once they save the returned information as GitHub client ID and GitHub client secret. Okay, cool. So I'm going to click register application, but I'm going to hide the information that comes up afterwards. Okay, so I'm going to copy my client ID and I'm going to come over to my .env file and I'm going to paste it into here. And we're going to call it GitHub client ID. I'm going to just say equal and then that. And I'm going to say GitHub client secret. And I'm going to put an equal sign and then I'm just going to copy this guy from here. And then I'm going to save that. Now I've got it in my development. We've got some git ignore going on here, so we're going to have to add these later. But now that we've got it on our local machine, we know it'll make it easier for us to find that in the future. Okay, so now let's close the env file and get out of here. Okay, so let's head back over here. So yeah, we've got our client, GitHub client ID and GitHub client secret in our .env file. So now in our route.js file, add social auth true to the homepage route. So let's pull up our route file, our homepage route. Here we're registering pug, and what we want to do now is add social auth to be true. So show social auth, and we're going to make that one true. Okay, and after show registration true. So show registration true. Okay, so we added that afterwards. Now create two routes accepting GET requests. So yeah, I'm just going to scooch this over here so I can see it. Now create two routes accepting from auth GitHub. Okay, so we'll throw it down here from at the bottom. Let's see here. App.route, passport authenticate. Oh, should we do it under authenticate? Route logout, use, it doesn't really matter. So I'm going to say, you know what, I'm going to start trying to get this slightly in alphabetical order. And so I'm going to put it here. So we're going to go app.route, and we're going to say for auth GitHub. And then we want to make two of them. So we're going to go app.route. And then we're going to do this one for / auth / GitHub / callback. Cool. Okay, cool. So now create two routes accepting GET requests for these guys. Okay, so these are both going to be GET requests. The first should only call passport to authenticate GitHub. The second should call passport to authenticate GitHub with a failure redirect to / and then if that is successful, redirect to profile. Okay, the first should only call passport to authenticate GitHub. How do we call passport? Okay, passport authenticate GitHub. So I think it's going to be dot. Okay, so let's put this on a new line. And then we're going to say git. And within here, we're going to say passport.authenticate. And we'll say GitHub. Yeah, I guess we'll just say failure redirect in here, just like that. And then we'll just, did it say that it wants us to failure redirect to the, okay, I mean, this needs to be within an object. So I want to make sure that we throw our brackets in there. Create two routes. The first should only call passport authenticate GitHub. Passport authenticate GitHub. Maybe that's all we need to do, just passport authenticate GitHub. No, failure redirect to home. And then if it is successful, redirect to profile. Passport authenticate failure. Okay, so got GitHub, and then if it's, so now what we're going to do is pass in a callback function to the GET request. So after we authenticate, I suppose, we're going to pass in a callback function of a rec and a res, and we'll do this guy. No, but this should probably, yeah, I think. Yeah, we want to, if it's successful, we want to go res.redirect to create two routes. The first should call authenticate. The second should authenticate with a failure redirect. Then if it was successful, go to profile. Ooh, okay, profile. But I think that this needs to actually be the first one. And this needs to be here, whereas we want to get rid of this guy here. Yeah, so this is all wrapped within the redirect. Let's see here. Like, now create two routes. The first should only call passport to authenticate GitHub. So passport authenticate GitHub. Actually, I think what we want to do is just do this. And then the second, we're going to go, the second should call passport to authenticate GitHub. So it's going to be the same thing. So here, route password GitHub. But instead of just saying GitHub, authenticate GitHub, we're going to have our failure redirect in there as the second argument. And then we're also going to pass in a callback function to deal with if it doesn't work. So our request and our response, we're passing that in, and we're saying response redirect to /profile. Okay, cool. So yeah, I think that this is right. Now, I'm not sure about this, so I'm just going to save it here. I've saved it in the routes file, and then let's see. Let's double check. It doesn't seem like I've got my server running, so nodemon server.js. So that's going to kick up the server. I want to make sure. Great. So this is the reason I started it. I wanted to find some errors. So it looks like there's an error on routes line 16, and it's an error with a syntax error. So that's not a big deal. We can fix that. So yeah, we need to put a semicolon in here. So I'm going to save this, and then we'll see if this causes it to work. It says that it's failed again, and now it's on line 19. So line 19 is here, GitHub. Okay, we've got double commas here, so I'm going to save this. And now it looks like our server is running. Successfully got the database connected, and now if we were to go to our local host, we could refresh. Now, there's no way, I don't think, to check this right now because we don't actually have the capacity to save users and things like that. So the only way to check to see if we're actually pulled this one off properly is to push our code up to our production server. So that's what we'll do. We know that the server runs, so that gives us a hint that we have things at least not completely broken. So I'm going to go git diff just to check out, see what's different. It shows me those things. I know that that's the stuff, so I want to go git status. You can see that we've adjusted the routes file. So git add. So I'm going to add that, and then I'm going to commit it, and we're going to say update routes.js with GitHub authentication. Okay, cool. And now we're going to git push Heroku master. Okay, so while this is pushing up, what I want to do is go to my Heroku account. So go to heroku.com. And I'm going to look for this because I need to add the environmental variables to the production server. It's not good enough just to have the environmental productions on your local machine because that's not going to do anything. So you want to make sure that we go to Desolate Savannah, which is in one of my projects. And we're going to go to settings, and we're going to reveal the var configs. And then what we're going to do is also bring up the environmental file. So here's my GitHub client ID. I'm going to reveal the var configs, and then I'm going to inject these into here. So the first one I'm going to say GitHub client ID. And then I'm going to copy my client ID and put it into here. And click add. And then I'm also going to say my GitHub, oh, look, CLIENT, my GitHub client secret is right there, and I'm going to copy this guy and put it into here. Yours will look different than mine, obviously. Okay, cool. And so, did I change it? Anyways, close my environmental variable and I'll hide my var configs. And so now that we've we stored our config variables to our production env file, we actually have to do this in Heroku here. We should be good to go. So we've pushed our code up to our production app, which we can find here. And if we refresh our production app, it looks to be loading. So I'm going to copy this URL and bring it over to here and throw it into the solutions and see if it's working. Awesome. Looks like that worked. So once again, we set our variable configurations, and then we set up GitHub route for config, auth config, and we use passport to authenticate that. So if you were to go to auth GitHub, you're going to get a passport.authenticate, in which this middleware is probably going to take care of you somehow. The passport is coming from require passport. That's the npm package. And then once you're successful, passport is going, or GitHub is going to send you back to this redirect route, in which case they're going to authenticate you. And if it's a failure, they're going to send you to the root URL. But if it's success, they're going to send you to your profile and you will be logged in. So that's how that works. And yeah, we set the environmental variables in our Heroku server. So we have proper authentication, and that's everything for that one. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. We'll see you in the next lesson.